Hello. In this video I'll demonstrate how to use AngularJS in the context of a Worklight application. So during the video I will show how a basic application works, and then I will add Worklight authentication to this application, so you would see how you can integrate Worklight challenge handler in your AngularJS application. So the application is rather simple. So during the startup, application actually connects to the Worklight adapter, retrieves a feed of news, displays it in a list, and once user clicks on an item, it goes into details screen and actually shows details and description for the specific feed. So it's a basic application. So far it has no authentication, and we'll implement authentication on a later stage. So to the application. So the first thing to do when you want to create an Angular-based application, you need to, of course, download the AngularJS. In case you require additional plugins, I'm using here Angular Sanitize. You need to download them as well, and add them to your project. So in addition to Angular, I'm also using Bootstrap from Twitter, so just to prettify my UI a little bit. So now Angular added to the application. You add scripts, CSS required for your application to the head section, and now you're starting to add Angular properties. So the first property is actually tells Angular framework to the what is the context of your application. So here I'm setting ng app Angular starter app on the whole HTML element of my HTML of my DOM basically. And this means that the whole HTML is my Angular ng application app. So later on my body, I define that my ng controller, Angular controller, is application controller that will be known throughout the application, throughout the HTML as app.ctrl. Application controller. So we'll get back to the internal elements in a little while. So let's see where this is coming from and where this is coming from. So I'm moving to main.js, and basically here I'm starting to create my Angular code. So first of all, I'm creating a module, angular.module called Angular starter up. And in the square brackets I'm actually saying that it depends on an Angular sanitize, which I've added previously. That's Angular sanitize. I will explain a little bit later what exactly it does. So that's it. That's how module is created. So this application will have a single module, but if you want, you can actually go to the Angular documentation website and see how you can create multiple modules and define dependencies between them. So Angular starter application, that's basically my application. So this is my module. Now then, in the context of this module, I'm actually creating my application controller. So Angular allows you to create controller because it's an MVC framework. So basically there's a clear separation between models, between views and controllers when you use Angular. So views is something implemented in HTML. That's basically a view. And controller is something that controls the way view is rendered, information, etc, etc, etc. Module is basically it's some skeleton that holds your information. So in this specific case, I'm saying that application controller will be a controller of my body element. So everything, every little piece of functionality inside of body will be controlled in the application controller. Now inside of body I can define additional sections that will have their own controllers. So I might have several nested controllers, but for sake of simplicity I will be just using application controller because it's very simple application. Now let's see how do I create controller. I go to app.controller. I tell the API my controller name, application controller, and then I specify a function that will actually define the behavior of my controller. So as a parameter, my function will receive first of all scope, so that's the scope of the controller, and reference to CSC, that's basically the Angular sanitize plugin I've requested earlier. So I'm creating a logger. Okay, that's Worklight API. I will use logger to output the information. I'm storing reference to this into underscore this variable. Okay, so if you're familiar with JavaScript, you might know that JavaScript context is a tricky thing, and you can use either this trick or actually create closures to encapsulate your scope, but I will be using this very simple approach just for the sake of simplicity. Now, I will be storing several properties. So first of all, I have multiple page applications, so I want to store current page ID. My application will retrieve feeds from the internet, so I want to store them in the context of my controller, so will have feeds. Okay, that's so far it's an empty array. I will also store current feed, okay, because once I go into a details screen, I actually want to display the current feed, the information from it, so I will be storing it separately. Okay, so those are three variables I use in my controller. This one is private because I declare it with var, and those two are public. I will be able to use it externally from HTML. Okay, because with this syntax I actually create kind of public variables. Now then I define several public functions. So my controller will have a change page function, okay, and as a parameter it will get a page ID. So each of my pages will have an ID. So for example, feeds page will be page 1, details page will be page 2, login page will be page 3. So once I move to the different page, I'm just changing current page ID to the page ID I sent as a parameter. Okay, and the beauty about Angular, the beautiful thing about Angular is that it actually maintains a dynamic binding between controller and view. So I will not have to actually hide all other pages and show this specific page. Once I change my current page ID, the old page, previous page will be hidden automatically, and the new one will be shown automatically. So we'll see how it works in a moment. Now, then I have another function called should_display. So, and this is the function that's actually responsible for saying to every page should it be displayed or not. So, for example, page will send its ID, and I will return whether the ID of the page is equal to current page ID. Right? So, for example, if my current page ID is 1 and I'm sending should display page 3, the answer will be false. Okay, and this is basically how 3 of those pages work. Okay, this is a very basic approach just to demonstrate how to use Angular in the context of Worklight, but it's the easiest to understand. So since the body of my HTML is application controller, okay, I can actually invoke application controller methods from inside of my body. So I'm adding ng-show, okay, and saying app controller should display 1. So in case should display mapped here, okay, so in case my current page ID is 1, this page will be displayed. In case it's 2, this page will be displayed. In case it's 3, login page will be displayed. Okay, so basically I'm automating showing and hiding my pages with just having a page ID. Okay, this is a very powerful feature of AngularJS, dynamic binding and update of HTML content. So now render HTML, I will go through it a little bit later. Okay, so on feed items click, you know what, we'll go over this a little bit later as well. Now, I have 3 pages: feeds page, details page, and login page. But those are not standard HTML or even HTML5 elements, right? So this is the custom element. Angular allows you to create custom elements to make your code, your HTML readable, okay, by something they call directives. So let's look where the feeds page is actually defined. So if I go to my main.js file and I scroll to the bottom, so here I'm creating a directive. Okay, I'm calling my directive feeds page. Okay, and I'm returning an object that will actually tell AngularJS how the feeds page should behave. So first of all, I'm restricting it to E, and E means element. Okay, so feeds page will be an element. and I'm telling which template URL to use. So this is feeds page HTML. Okay, so as you can see, I have feeds page here, my feeds page HTML. Okay, so basically what this means, it will change camel case feeds page into this type of notion. Okay, feeds minus page. Okay, and it will look for the feeds page.html file. So this file will be loaded automatically by Angular. Okay, and the content of this file will be injected right over here. So if we take a look at the feeds page, this is a very simple HTML. So first I have h1s in header ones in feeds, then I have a line divider, and then I'm using once again Angular Notion. So I'm creating a list, and this list has multiple items. So here once again I'm using Angular. I'm saying Angular repeat for every feed in application controller feeds. Remember this, application controller feeds, so far it's empty. For every feeds, okay, give me the content of my li list item. Okay, so here in this specific case, we'll have feed publication date displayed and feed title. So this is a great way to actually do templates for your application, or just to have parts of your UI stored as separate HTML files. So now, in addition to having the content, I'm also having ng click. Okay, so this means once the li, the list item, will be clicked, I'll invoke, the application will invoke application controller on feed item clicked, and it will send an index as the parameter. So $index, that's an internal Angular notion. Basically, once I'm using ng repeat, okay, I can use $index to specify the index of the item in this array. So for example, for the first feed it will be 0, for the second it will be 1, for the third it will be 2, and so forth. Okay, so by having those 4 lines, I'm actually creating my whole content. Okay, my whole list content. And in addition, feed in application controller feeds is actually, this HTML content will be bound to the application controller feeds. So once application controller feeds will update, all of the content generated here will also be updated. Okay, so once again, powerful feature of Angular, dynamic binding. Okay, so let's see how actually the content is retrieved. Okay, so this is basically on feed item clicked. That's what we've just talked about. Once I click the item, I'm setting current feed to this feed's feed ID. Every item will send me its ID, okay, because I got it from index. And then I'm saying current page ID equals to. Note that I'm not doing some show, some hide, some manual DOM manipulation. I'm just changing current page ID. And Angular is smart enough to actually change my UI, because that's the page ID too, and once I change my ID, only this page will be displayed. Okay, so let's see how actually Worklight code works here, because we need to retrieve feeds from our Worklight adapter. Now, once again, for sake of simplicity, adapter returns some predefined hard-coded feed, right? It's a relatively simple example. So in my controller, because I know that this is the first controller, application controller, that will be executed, I'm taking control over the Worklight startup flow. So basically what this means, in my init options, I've commented out this section. Okay, so now I'm taking manual control over when to call WL client init. Right, so first of all, I'm setting init options on success function. Okay, and once initialization Worklight init will be successful on success, I'm doing adapter invocation. Very plain, very simple. Use adapter, get stories procedure. Very simple. So in case of success, I'm calling on get stories success. In case of failure, on get stories failure. Very simple. Okay, so in case of success, I'm updating these feeds, okay, to the items I've received from the backend, okay, with a single line. And then I'm using Angular API. I'm actually telling Angular, please apply changes, and Angular will figure out the UI restructuring by itself. Okay, so once again, I'm changing my feeds object, okay, the one we've defined here, this feeds, and I'm telling Angular apply, okay, which means apply changes, Angular will update the UI. So now that I have this in place, what's left to do? Don't mind the commented part yet. I'm calling WL client init with my init options. So once I restart on application startup, you can see that the application goes to the Worklight server, retrieves feeds, and then shows those feeds here. Okay, so let's see how the second page works, because we know that once I click my item, I'm setting current feed, right? And I'm saying current page ID equals 2. So page ID equals 2 means details page. Once again, in my main.js I have one more directive called details page. It works absolutely similar to the previous one, okay, but this is a different, let's call it template. So details page has also a header with text details. It displays application controller current feed title. Okay, now then it uses application controller render HTML function for the body. We will go there in a moment. And then we're displaying a publication date. Okay, so eventually in the end we're adding one button, big button, large button, that will invoke application controller dot change page 1. So page number 1, that's the list of the feeds, and this is gonna be the back button. Okay, very simple UI. Now this is taken from current feed, because in main.js we have current feed which we're updating. Okay, so on item clicked we're updating the current feed with the feed according to the index, and this is actually will be taken from current feed, controller object property. This works the same. However, for body we're invoking render HTML function, and I'll explain why this is the approach. So basically the description that we're getting, I'll try to show it in here in log. Let's see, title, description. It contains HTML tags. Okay, and since I want to actually strip those tags to actually display it as a text, I'm using Angular Sanitize plugin. So basically, that's Angular API, no need to go too deep inside of it. It's saying render HTML just goes to the plugin, saying trust as HTML, and taking the description of this feed. So this API will sanitize the HTML, remove all unnecessary data from here, and will leave me and return just a plain text instead of HTML. Okay, so once I click here, I'm moving to the next page, to the details page, which is implemented according to my template. Okay, title, HTML, publication date, button, title, HTML, the content, publication date, and back button. Okay, so this is a very simple Angular application, okay, and it demonstrates so far how to implement module, how to implement controller, how to implement directives, and how to bind all of this in the context of Worklight application. So the last remaining part is actually to show how to integrate here Worklight authentication. Okay, and for that I've already created in my authentication config, I've created basic adapter authentication. Okay, so I've created a security test called adapter security test. It's nothing special, just regular adapter authentication. Okay, so in my code, application code, I will uncomment authentication related part. Okay, and also in my adapter, I will uncomment the procedure. So now getStories procedure is actually protected by adapter security test, and we have a submit auth function that is used to submit authentication. Now, just to show you adapter implementation, authentication required will return authentication status required, and submit auth will just check username for a hard-coded Bob. Okay, and in case authentication succeeds, I'm saying my username is Bob. I will actually set username. Will actually set user identity. Okay, and return authentication status complete. Otherwise, well, bad user and send authentication status required. So this is a very simple hard-coded adapter authentication just to demonstrate client side. So I will run as deploy Worklight Adapter. Okay, deployed. Now, let's go a little bit over the code of the authentication components. So, first of all, login page, right? So this is the template, the HTML of my login page. Header, line divider, I have an input, okay, which has ng model username, okay, specified. I'll explain what it means in a moment. Okay, then I have a placeholder enter username, and once again a button that will invoke application controller submit button clicked. So you can actually create another login controller and map your button to login controller, but this is in order to keep things simple. Now, ng model username means that the Angular will actually look for the controller this piece of code is inside, okay, and will look for a username property in its scope. So basically, here I'm using $scope dot username equals empty string. So basically here I'm defining my username property, property of the scope of this controller. Okay, so now if I restart my application, whoops, I'm getting a login form. So if I'm saying my username is hello, that's how I initialize my variable, my scope variable, which I used in my model. So, oh yeah, this is because of this. Okay, so you will see it in a moment, how it works. So what happens on a startup? Once user tries to connect to the server, right, we're getting 401 and we're eventually getting, let's see, network, we're eventually getting a response that says authentication status required. Now, in order to actually catch that and handle it, we need a challenge handler. So here I'm creating a challenge handler. Right, regular Worklight API inside of my controller. I'm setting is custom response function that will actually look for response JSON of status equal if a type of it is string. Okay, so in case it's string, return true. So this means handle challenge will be invoked. In case it's not, there is no such thing, return false. So I expect you to be familiar with Worklight challenge handling. Okay, so this shouldn't be new for you. Okay, so handle challenge function gets the response from server. It retrieves authentication status and it checks in case authentication status is required, equals required. Okay, it will change page to page number 3, which is actually a login page. Okay, that's a login page, and it will also clear the username saved under scope. So this is why actually when I change it to hello, we haven't got any text. So if I change it this one to hello, we should see the text hello. Okay, now in case it's not required, we will change page to 1. Okay, and we will call submit success. So this probably should be if o status equals, let's see, and our second option is complete, equals complete, change page to 1 and submit success. And of course, since we're doing UI manipulations, we're telling Angular to apply changes. Okay, good. So this is a very, very basic challenge handler. Okay, it just knows how to recognize stuff. Okay, and it will change page. So once again, we're not doing any manual show and hides. We're just using change page API, and Angular by itself actually discovered that the current page ID was changed, and that this code should be executed and verified which one of those screens should be shown. Okay, so scope apply, let's see how it works. So I'm doing a bad username. Okay, invoke username doesn't work. It cleans my input every time. Good, every time I'm getting response authentication status required, required, required. So submit button, how actually submit button works. So as you can see here, on ng click, I'm invoking application controller, submit button clicked, no parameters whatsoever. So submit button is actually in scope of the same controller. That's why I can actually access the model variables we've defined. Okay, so scope.username, since I'm changing it. Okay, so this is bound to the username property of my model. Okay, so here in my submit button clicked, I can reference by $scope.username. So I'm showing, I'm outputting this to the screen. As you can see, every time I can see the username I've entered. Okay, and then I'm doing regular challenge handler submit adapter authentication. Okay, adapter news adapter, procedure submit auth, parameters, I'm getting the username. Okay, and doing regular adapter authentication. So no surprises here. So once invocation completes, it will once again go through the is custom response or handle challenge flow, right? And once authentication actually successful, it will return authentication status equals complete, and this code will run. So let's actually see this in action, right? So bad username didn't work. Let's try Bob. Okay, I'm on purpose, I'm cleaning my log here. Okay, cleaning this, doing submit, and we're back to a screen with feeds. So what actually happens? The first was response authentication status complete, right? It was caught by a challenge handler. So in case authentication status complete, I've changing to page number 1, which is a list of feeds, and I'm doing submit success. So this is the Worklight API. This actually tells Worklight framework to make original request, the one that triggered authentication again. So, and that's the request was triggered again, and we got our feeds. So, and from here on, everything continues to work just the same. Okay, so if I restart my application, I will go directly into feeds because I'm already on authenticated session. Okay, but if you actually want to see authentication again, you can do resources, let's see, cookies. I'm terminating my cookie session cookies, so if I restart now, I will go into login flow once again. Okay, so here we've seen another interesting feature of AngularJS is the fact that the username is defined as model. Okay, so I'm saying ng model username. It will go to a controller. This HTML is in context of, and look for a scope property called username. And this is exactly what we've defined here and what we're using here. So that's basically a notion of Angular model. So you can download this project and play with it. There are more than one way to actually implement the same, so I've tried to keep it as simple as possible, and I hope you've enjoyed watching.